فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So the last place that we stopped off in our studying of Abu Shujaa was in the chapter of Ghusl. And so we talked about what makes Ghusl obligatory, and just like a quick review, there's like 6 things that make Ghusl obligatory. And the author here, he said 3 of them are shared between men and women, which are intercourse, discharge of semen, and death. So these are the three that apply to everyone. And then the 3 that are specific to women that he brought up, which complete the 6, is one is menstruation, and the other one is postpartum bleeding. And usually these take like the same ruling, the same hukum. They're basically the same when it comes to hukum. And then also giving birth as well. And this is kind of like a hypothetical scenario if someone were to give birth without any postpartum bleeding, which I'm pretty sure the doctors would say that's not possible. But this is a hypothetical scenario that he put in here. And occasionally in the fuqaha, the scholars, they will come up with scenarios that are very that are hypothetical, or maybe they won't happen, so that they can see so they could see if this thing were to happen, this is how we would respond to it. And so occasionally, in the bigger books of fiqh, there'll be things that we now know wouldn't happen, and sometimes there's things that back then they had a view of what if this was this way, then it would be like this, and only nowadays would we ever come up with some of these things because of the scenarios that have happened. So occasionally it goes into a place where we know it wouldn't happen, and sometimes it's actually it shows just how far forward these people would look into the future when it comes to the possible scenarios that could possibly happen and occur. And so this is it kind of goes both ways in that. Rahimahumullah. And so the next thing that he talks about within the chapter of Ghusl is he talks about what are the things, how do we make Ghusl? And of course, in general, Ghusl is something that, in Arabic, Ghusl means washing. And so this means washing. And of course, for anything that we do that is an act of worship, or that has some type of, that has a similarity to something that we would do in our normal day. Normally people take showers, and normally people would take showers or baths. This is something that we do just to clean. So the thing that makes it different from us doing it for us to clean, or from us doing it to raise that state of impurity from us, the only difference here is the intention. And so this is the first thing of the 3 main things that he mentions here. He says, "Fasl wa fara'idul ghusl thalathatu ashya." So he says, in this chapter, that there's 3 fara'id, which is farida. It's something which is a pillar that we have to do, that must be done for ghusl. And so the first one he mentions here is because this is something that looks like a normal action that we would do every day. That's not necessarily an act of worship. He says a niyyah. And the niyyah is something, as I mentioned before, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, "Innamal a'malu binniyat," which is that the actions that we do are only according to their intentions. So of course, what's the difference between making a ghusl, or washing yourself, which in Arabic you would call this iktasal. You would say this person, if he washed himself, you would say iktasala, which is the same word from ghusl, where it comes from. You would say this it's the same thing. There's no difference except for the niyyah. So if somebody goes in and they are in a state of, say they're in a state of janaba, which is what you call someone who is in that major state of impurity, you'd say they're junub, which is a state of janaba. And so this person, if they were to go into a bathroom, and so then they take a shower and they wash everything, they wash all of their body, and they didn't intend it, then they didn't raise that state of impurity from them. They have to have that intention, because the actions that someone does, especially when it comes to actions in the deen, you only get from it what you intended from it. So if you didn't intend to raise the impurity from your that major impurity, if you didn't have that intention, then you won't have the, even if you did the action without the intention, it doesn't raise the purity. It doesn't raise that impurity from the body. And so this is something that's very important for someone to see. Just, the like over-encompassing concept of that niyyah is very, very important. And this particular hadith, Imam Shafi'i says it goes into like more than 70, and they use 70 as like the Arabs, they'll use 70 as like just a huge number. It goes into more than 70 babs, or like chapters of fiqh, because this comes up so often. Of the intention is very, very important for somebody that for all different types of actions, especially ghusl, because this is the thing that separates it from something that is normal. And of course, when it comes to looking at the intention, that separates things from other things that are like it, which is also like if you were to stand up and pray 4 rakas, like what's the difference between this and praying asr, or praying dhuhr, or just praying something that's like that's nafil, which is something that's not obligatory. The only difference between this that separates these different salah is having the intention. And so that's why it's also important in like salah, even though yes, it's an act of worship and we don't make salah in just like a normal way, or like we don't do this as a normal daily action, except that it's an act of worship. And so, but this is something that separates the different salah from what's the difference between like asr and dhuhr. It's the intention that we have when we go into it. And so the same thing here when it comes to ghusl, it's the intention that separates it from just taking a regular shower. And so this is the first thing, which he says is from the fara'id, which we could also say is like a rukun, or like a pillar of ghusl. The first thing is intending it, and then the second thing that he mentions here is وَإِزَالَةُ النَّجَاسَةِ إِنْ كَانَتْ عَلَى بَدَنِهِ. And so he says, and the getting rid of, which is removing any najis or najasa if it was on the body. And so anything najis needs to be taken off of the body, so that the water can get to that space, get to that place, and wash it. So this is one thing that is another thing. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he would make ghusl, that the first thing that he would do is that he would wash his he would wash himself and make sure, like, wash his private areas and whatnot, as the first thing that he would do to make sure that there was nothing dirty that was left on him. And then after that, then he would make we'll talk about the sunnah things, but then he would make wudu after he would do that, and then he would pour water into his head, and then he would put water onto the rest of his body after that. And so this is the first thing the Prophet ﷺ would do is he would take anything like any of the qadr, or like anything that was whether it's najis and whatnot, he would get rid of that first and foremost, and then he would continue with the washing of his body. So sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so and this is one of the things that, like in the Shafi'i madhab, it's mentioned, and this is the view of, there's 2 main imams in the Shafi'i madhab that come afterwards, that are like the people, and this is the view of Imam Rafi'i. And Imam Rafi'i, he adds this view that if you don't take the thing off, anything najis off of the body, then of course, like, even if you put water on there, it has to be removed first. So this thing that's najis on the body, we have to wash this thing off of it first, and that doesn't count for washing it as well. And Imam Nawawi says if you wash it off of your body, then it also washed it. So there's a slight difference between these 2 imams in the madhab. But in general, anyone who washes something, they just wash it a couple times, and they make sure that there's nothing left that's najis on their body, and this is the important thing. And the third thing that he mentions here is, and this is very important, is making water reach all of the hair, roots, and skin. So he says, and إيصال المال وإيصال المال إلى جميع الشعر والبشرة. And so he says here that it's important to make sure that water reaches all of the hair roots, which is like all of the hair. So all of the hair, including the roots, and also all of the skin. So the water needs to touch every single skin that is on the outside of the body. And so this is important for someone when they make this ghusl, to make sure that there's any nooks and crannies that they get water to reach every single thing of their body. And so this person should make sure that water, if they have like hair and whatnot that is thick, they should make sure that the water gets into the roots of their hair as well as the water gets into the actual hair itself. And if a woman has like braids, she should make sure that water gets inside the braids and whatnot, so it reaches all of the hair. And so this is something she doesn't necessarily have to take it apart, unless she knows of a certainty that like the water won't get inside of it. But it's important that water reaches all of the head, as well as all of the hairs and the roots of the hairs, and all of the hairs on the person's body. And because this is a part of encompassing the water, making sure that the water encompasses all of the body on the outside. Of course, like putting water inside of the nose and inside of the mouth, this is something you didn't mention here, and this is something that comes from like making wudu inside of the ghusl, and this is something that is sunnah according to the Shafi'i madhab, and some of the other madhabs, such as the Hanbali madhab, they say you have to put water inside of your nose and mouth because this is a part of the outside of the body. And but this is not the view of the Shafi'i madhab, because it's something that's viewed as inside the body, just as like under the eyelids is inside the body. We don't have to wash under the eyelids, and this is this like inside the nose and inside the mouth is something that's sunnah, but it's not something that's that would render someone's ghusl invalid if they left it off, and Allah knows best. But of course, leaving the khilaf, or like the difference of opinion, is always good. So like making ghusl inside of the or making wudu inside of the ghusl is something that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to do, and if you do this is something that there'll be no difference of opinion, or at least washing with water inside of your mouth and inside of your nose, like you do when you make wudu. Then this is something that is good to do. And so this is the most important thing. And also the amount of water used, it doesn't need to be a lot. Like the amount of water for someone making ghusl, the Prophet ﷺ, it's narrated that he made a ghusl with a sa'. And a sa' is like four of these cups. If I were to say like 4 of these cups, or like 3 of these cups, because this is a kind of a bigger cup, but it would be about that much water that he would make all of this. So of course, if someone has like a little bucket and they put like a small amount of water and they just like used a cup to pour it onto the body, you could see that they could make a ghusl with a very little amount of water. And so this is something that is doable, to make it with a little bit of water, so you don't have to use a ton of water. Of course, this is something that like if you use extra water, then you just look in and try not to waste water, because this is something that is prohibited. Like wasting in general is something that is prohibited in Islam. So this is something that they keep in mind, and people don't have to use a ton of water to make sure that the ghusl is proper. All they need to do is make sure that water reached all of their body. And if they need to do this by running their hand along their body, then this is good. And if they know that the water reached it without them running the hand on their body, then this is something that's okay, inshallah. And so then the next thing that the author here he brings up some of the things that are sunnah to do while doing this. And as I mentioned, that hadith, this is something that the Prophet ﷺ, it's mentioned that he did this. And so the way that the Prophet ﷺ, he made a ghusl, this is basically the basis for the preferred actions, which are the sunnah. And so he says, the author here, he says, وَسُنَنُهُ خَمْسَةُ أَشْيَاء التسمية والوضوء قبله وإمرار اليد على الجسد والموالاة وتقديم اليمنى على اليسرى. So he says here that there's 5 preferred actions for it. And the first one, which is tasmiyah, which is saying Bismillah. And so this is the first thing that's mentioned. And this is like, basically it's qiyas, which is likening one thing to another with wudu. So in wudu, it's he said it was sunnah for us to say Bismillah before making wudu. So just like wudu, he said it's also sunnah to say Bismillah here in the ghusl, because it's the same thing. It's raising the state of impurity from the body. So raising the state of impurity, it's over there. It's he said it was sunnah, so here he says it's sunnah as well, because these are two like actions. Like these are 2 actions that are like each other. And this is basically the concept. If you're wondering what is qiyas, this is qiyas because you have like one thing that is similar and you have another thing. So if it was over there, then what's the difference between these things? And if there's no difference, then it takes the ruling as well. And so this is how he got the saying Bismillah, as this is a sunan for it. And it's not actually mentioned in the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said Bismillah in Ghusl. So this is why we'd say like this is like qiyas, which is like the likening of one similar thing to another and taking its ruling. And so he says this here, and saying Bismillah is one of the preferred actions for it. And the next thing he said here was wal wudu'u qablahu, and making wudu at the beginning of it, or like before it. And so this is comes from the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, when he would start off his making ghusl, first thing he would do would wash his private parts from anything that was on it, and then he would make wudu after wiping off his hands, and then he would make wudu, and like he was making salah. And in one of the hadiths, the Prophet ﷺ, he made wudu except for his feet. And this is probably because of the area that he was at. He would have gotten his feet, if they would have gotten wet, they would have gotten muddy. And so he wanted to wash his feet when they would actually clean that. So he waited until then, after he had made the ghusl, and then he washed his feet at the end in another place. But in the hadith, then he made wudu like he would make it for salah. And then the next thing that he did was he made the ghusl after he made wudu. So he started off with wudu, and then he made a ghusl, and then he made and then he finished off the wudu with his feet afterwards. And so this is so he says here, making wudu first, like at the beginning of that, is something that's sunnah for someone to do, as the Prophet ﷺ, he did it, but he didn't command other people to do this. So this is something that following in his footsteps is something that is good for us to do, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't make it obligatory in this case. And then running, the next thing that he says here is running wa imrarul yadi ala jasad, which is running the wet hands over the body. So it's like making sure that there's nowhere that water missed. And this is like, it's also called dalk in Arabic. And this is something that some of the scholars, they said it's obligatory. But as I mentioned before, when we were talking about washing, when we're washing someone's the hands, or washing between the toes, that running your hands between the toes to make sure that water gets in there isn't obligatory unless you know that water won't make it to it unless you do it. And if you know that water won't make it unless you do it, then you got to do it. Then it's obligatory in that case. So, but in general, like if we were to run our hands over all of our body or over the body to make sure that the water reached everything, and like if someone needs to get in between any nooks and crannies, this is something they need to make sure that they do, and make sure that anything that is shown from their body in general, anything that is shown from that's like in the exterior part of the body, like going inside the body, isn't necessary, but anything that is shown normally on the outside of the body, it needs to be washed, as well as like the private parts. If someone was to sit, and then anything that would be shown while they're like totally open, so to say, and this also needs to be washed with water. So like to make sure that the water reaches every single nook and cranny that is on the outside of the body. And so this is something that is a part of it. But if you can't do it except running the hands over the body, then it's good. It's sunnah for you to run your hands over the body, and it's wajib or obligatory if you can't do it without it. So this is one of the things. It could be this or it could be that. It could be either sunnah or it could be obligatory, depending on the person and their body type and whatnot, and situation. So then the next thing that he mentions is the fourth one, which is wal muwalat, which is doing everything continuously. So muwalat is making sure that when you start, you finish it off without taking any breaks in the middle of it. So like technically, if someone, so he says here, this is of the sunnah. So if someone were to say they were to start their ghusl, and they wash like one side of their body and wash their head and whatnot, and then they missed a part, and then when they finished everything except for that one part, they could just wash that one part, and then it would finish the ghusl. And this is something that like this is something that people shouldn't do, but sometimes people will do this. So if somebody say they had like some type of fingernail polish, which is something that like I definitely never I never recommend any woman wear fingernail polish. One, like wearing it in front of men is not something that's permissible. But if she were to wear like gloves after putting on fingernail polish, say she was on her period, and so like that time during her period she wanted to wear fingernail polish, but then when she comes out of it, she would need to get rid of the fingernail polish so that the water can reach every single part of her body at the end of that when she takes that ghusl. But say she missed something of that. If she washed all of her body and then she had that left, if she took off the fingernail polish and just put water on it, it would finish it on the madhab of Shafi'i. It's like this is something that would finish the ghusl in that case. Because then the water reached everything, even if she had already finished and whatnot, but there was a little left, then she would need to wash that, and she wouldn't have to redo the whole ghusl. But it is sunnah for someone to do the whole ghusl in one go, and to make sure that there's nothing breaking it up. As this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he used to do. He would make the ghusl all together, and there's no like there's no like examples of people's breaking it up, except as I mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ would wash his feet after he had finished in another area. And this is, the scholars will talk about that this was so he wouldn't necessarily get his feet muddy, because the place that he was washing is not necessarily in a bathtub or these things. They didn't have these things at that time. But rather he was on the earth, like on the, like just the earth floor. And so like that would get muddy. And so if he would wash his feet on that, he would get dirty right away. So walking to another place and then washing his feet would make sure that it was clean afterwards. And this is for the person that like fears having their feet get dirty in the place that they're washing. And so like if we're washing like say in a bath, like in a shower and like a bathtub or something of that sort, we don't have to worry about this. So this is something you just wash your feet right away. And so then the next thing that he mentioned here, after doing everything continuously, is starting with the right side and then the left. And this goes back to the hadith that Aisha, she narrates, that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to love starting with his right in everything, and like in his tahur, and like in his tuhur, which is like in all of his like washing and like cleaning and purification, he would start with his right in this, as well as like other things, and like when he would wear shoes or put on clothes and whatnot. All of these things are things that he would start with his right and prefer to start with his right and then the left. And for the ghusl, how do we start with our right and our left? Like for the right, you would do like the right side, and like whether it's the front, you would do the right, and then you start with the front side, starting with the top to the bottom. And you would start with the like washing the hair first, and then washing the top, the front right side, and then you go to the back right side, and then you go to the left right side, and then you would go to the back of the left side. And that's how you do it, from the top going down. And this is in general the way that someone would do that to get the sunnah of doing it with the right side, then going on to the left. And then the next thing that we're going to go into is we're going to go into the times that it's sunnah to make ghusl. If there's any questions about what we went over, go ahead and feel free to ask about this last section, because of course it's very important. Alright, so the next part of this is he talks about the chapter which is about the sunnah ghusls. Like one of the times it's sunnah to make ghusl. And here, in a general principle is that any time that there's a ijtima' an-nas, like any time that the people get together and we all come together in one place, it's sunnah to make ghusl, so that we don't all get together in one place and people haven't taken a bath in a while or a shower. Then this would hurt people. Like people are gonna have they're gonna be like, there'll be a bad smell. So one of these is like for Jum'ah, and this is the thing that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ghusl Jum'ah wajibun ala kulli muhtarim, and that washing in Jum'ah is something that is wajib. He says wajib here, and there's a bit of difference about this, because the term wajib wasn't necessarily like a terminology for that, but rather it's like linguistic meaning. It is something that is that needs to be done. And so like this is something he says it's sunnah, and there's a difference of opinion. Some people say that it's obligatory to make the ghusl for Jum'ah, but this is something also in another hadith the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if somebody makes a ghusl before coming to Jum'ah, then this is something that is better. And if they make wudu, then this is something that is good. So if people say if it's better and this is good, then it's okay to go to Jum'ah with only making wudu. and like the Jumu'ah is still valid without making the ghusl beforehand. And this is what a lot of the scholars have taken this, and some of the scholars have said no, the person needs to have made ghusl before coming to Jumu'ah, like as it's obligatory, and they would be a sinner for not making it. And so the view of the Shafi'i madhab is that it's something that is good and it's better to do, but it's not something that is that will invalidate the Jumu'ah, or something that this person is a sinner for not doing it. But in general, as I mentioned, that making sure that everybody, when if they're coming together, that they're not like disturbing their neighbors. So if there's one person that hasn't taken a shower in like a week, or or more, and he comes and sits next to a group of people, or sits in the middle of a group of people, it's going to be hard for them to focus in the khutbah, or even focus in salah. Like as if you have someone that has a very strong stench come and pray right next to you in salah, this is something that can be disturbing. And so this is good for someone, if they're ever coming into these gatherings, to always make sure that they have a good smell about them, and also wearing tib, or like the different types of like odors, like the different types of scents and colognes and whatnot. This is something the Prophet ﷺ, he used to love wearing all types of like different misk and whatnot. These things, the Prophet ﷺ used to love having a good smell about him. And so the author, he says, فَصْلٌ وَالِاغْتِسَالَاتُ الْمَسْنُونَةُ 17 غُسْلًا. And so he says that there's 17 times for it's sunnah to make ghusl. So he gives us these 17 times, and he'll talk about these. He'll bring these up here. And so the first one that he says here is for Jumu'ah, as I mentioned here, ghusl al-Jumu'ah. And so this is the first one. He mentions it first because also it's the one that has the most difference of opinion with it. Is it obligatory? Is it not obligatory? And the view here that he gives is that it's not obligatory, but rather it's something that is preferred. And this is the view of Imam Shafi'i. And he mentions and Imam Shafi'i mentions this in his book Al-Risala, and he talks about how do we know, when we put together all the hadiths in this subject, we see that some of it says that this is afdal, which it means it's better. And to say it's better also means that it's that only doing wudu is something that is good. So if something is good and there's better, then this means that both of them are okay. So if you did only one of them, then it's okay. And so, of course, it's best to leave the difference of opinion, because the Prophet ﷺ did say ghusl al-Jumu'ah wajibun. And so, like saying that it's wajib is like, it's very hard to say that this is not obligatory. But the other evidences that come around this, as well as the actions of the Sahaba, show that many of them did not view this as something that was obligatory, but rather as something that was mustahab, or something that was very, very important to do, but it's not necessarily obligatory. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he also said haqqul Muslim, and he says the thing that every Muslim should do is that they shouldn't go a week without making a ghusl, without washing their body. And so this is, of course, anybody that doesn't take a bath or a shower for like a week, this is something that obligatory, like obligation on them, and also for like the people around them. But like this is a obligation on them for them to take at least a shower every single week, whether they come to Jumu'ah or not. Like this is something that they should do, and they should never let a week go by without taking a shower. And of course, this is something that a normal person, they will never let this happen. But as like a rule for someone to understand that this is something the Prophet ﷺ has like imposed upon the people, to make sure that they always take they should always be taking a shower at least once a week at the very minimal. And of course, like at that time, maybe there's people that this wasn't necessarily something easy, but alhamdulillah, in this day and age, this is something that's pretty easy for people. And so this is something that he says here. It's Jumu'ah is the first time, and then the next time that he mentions is that wal Eidain. And this is the two Eids, so Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. And so these are the next two times that it's sunnah for it to be done. And this is it's narrated that Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, that he used to make ghusl for the Yom al-Fitr, like for Eid al-Fitr. Like before he would do this, before he'd go to the Salah, he would make ghusl before going to the Salah. And so this is for this is like Yom al-Fitr, like Eid al-Fitr is the one for Ramadan. So like that is also the Eid for al-Adha. So this is also using qiyas for Adha from what we see from this Eid, because they're both Eids and we're both coming together in that gathering. So this is this takes the same ruling as that. And this is another example of qiyas. And I would like to bring up some of these examples of how do the scholars they get these rulings, because this helps someone understand that these rulings don't come out of midair. Like this is something that like the scholars didn't just come up and just say without any evidence. They just come up and say this is this and this is this, and they give different rulings for things. But rather, if something is like something else and there's no difference between it, then it takes the same ruling. And this is the principle of qiyas, and this will come up a lot in the in what we will study. And this is one of the types of evidences that we have in the Sharia that makes sure that the Sharia is always up to date with the age. Because when we see that there's a reason for why we do what we do, and then we see when this reason comes with something that we don't have a text for, that it also takes that same ruling. If there's no difference, like a major difference between that, then this is something that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that khamr is that every khamr is prohibited, and he also said anything that makes someone anyone that ma askara, like anything that makes somebody intoxicated is prohibited. And so, and everything that makes someone intoxicated is also khamr. And so he gave this likening between it. So khamr in general is something that is wine. It's wine that comes from grapes. So anything that also makes that, which is like we have beer, which comes from other things, or like vodka, and all these other types of things that make someone intoxicated, or if even like the other different drugs, all the new drugs that come out, we don't need a new text to say that all of these other new drugs are something that's haram. We know intoxication, anything that intoxicates, this takes the ruling of khamr, which is wine that they had in that time. And so this is something that makes sure that the Sharia is something that's always up to date with whatever comes at it. The Sharia can always have a ruling for every single thing in this. And someone looks at they look at what is like it in all of the texts that we have, and this gives us a way to know where do we go, regardless of the new things and new times that come up, or the new things that have it. So likening one thing to another is how we get a lot of the Sharia, and this is much of what fiqh is about. And this is the most detailed, this is like the area that takes the most work and the most thinking and pondering when it comes to this. And this is what the fuqaha have done when it comes to these areas. And so in general, as I mentioned before, the areas that we take our Sharia from, it's from, like, of course, from the Quran and then the Sunnah. And these two, there's no difference between them about that. We take these two. And then also qiyas. And this, there's also, or the next one would be ijma', which is the consensus. And then there's also qiyas. And for qiyas, the Zahiriyah, they went against it and said that qiyas is not something that is from the Sharia. But there was already ijma' of the like the Sahaba. There's already ijma' of them, like that consensus, before they came up with this rebuttal of qiyas. So this rebuttal of qiyas is something that it has ijma' or consensus on it, that it's a part of the Sharia. But because of the way that qiyas can sometimes be understood, and different people understand different reasons for why things are this way, there'll be differences of opinion that come up more in qiyas than you'll see in anything else. Like the Quran, if it says something, the only difference will be maybe someone understood it this way or this way. Or if the Hadith has something to say about an issue, then it'll come into difference. How did they understand it, if there is a difference? But when it comes to qiyas, this is where there will be more differences of opinion that come up with it, because it's open to debate. And in some areas, like of course there's some qiyas that's not open to debate, and there's some qiyas that is that can be that's debatable, and they'll have debates about it. And so, this is a little bit of I wanted to bring a little bit of usul. This is more the subject of usul fiqh, but I wanted to bring this together because this helps someone understand where do we get the rulings that we come up with. And I always want to make sure that people don't just know the ruling, but they know where does it come from, so they have this understanding. The next thing that he brings, he says the two Eids. The next thing he says is the prayer for rain, like the istisqa. And so he says here, well, istisqa. which is the prayer for rain. And this is something we'll talk about it in the book of prayer, that we'll talk about. This is a certain prayer that someone would make if there was ever a drought in the time. Then there's the prayer that they would go out, which is like Eid prayer. It's like the same type of thing of Eid prayer, but instead of the takbirat, they would say astaghfirullah, and so they'd make istighfar instead of that. But in general, it's like the Eid prayer, so it also takes the same ruling. And as I mentioned, people are getting together, and so it takes that ruling. And then also the moon eclipse and the sun eclipse prayers. These are two other prayers that if there's a lunar eclipse or there's a solar eclipse, there's also a prayer that's done for this. And because this prayer encompasses people coming together, it also takes the same ruling here, which is al-khusuf wal-kusuf. These are the two prayers that are done for that. And inshallah, we'll talk about these prayers in detail when it comes in its time. And the next one is wal-ghusl min ghusl al-mayyit. And this is something that is also mentioned in a hadith that's narrated from Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that he says that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ghassala maytan falyaghtasil, wa man hamalahu falyatawadda." And so this is a hadith that it has that what it basically means, that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever washes a dead body, as we mentioned, this is one of the things that has to be done or obligates a ghusl, is death. So this person, whoever washes a dead body before it's like covered and buried, then the Prophet ﷺ said, "Falyaghtasil," and then he should wash. Then he should wash himself. وَمَنْ حَمَلَهُ فَلْيَتَوَضَّأ. And if someone carries it, then he should make wudu. And the majority of the ulama, when they take this hadith, they don't see this as an obligation but rather they see that this is something that is good for them to do. And this is the majority of the ulama, and this is the view of like the Shafi'i madhab, is that this is something that is mustahab for someone to do. So if someone were to wash someone who was they were to wash a dead body, then they should also take a ghusl themselves. But this is something that's not obligatory on them, but rather it's something that is mustahab. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so and this is also because there's also another hadith that comes up that says laysa alaykum fi ghusli maytikum ghuslan idha ghasaltumuhu. So that there's no ghusl that's obligatory on you if you've washed a person that has died. فَإِنَّ مَيْتِكُمْ لَيْسَ بِنَجِسٍ, and that because they are not najis, like they're not something that is impure. فَحَسْبُكُمْ أَن تَغْسِلُوا أَيْدِيَكُمْ. And so like that in this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, then it's enough for you to wash your hands. So we could say if this washing that was mentioned before, maybe this is only referring to the hands. And some of the scholars said this was referring to actual ghusl all the way. And Allah knows best, but this is something that takes it away from being obligatory. And this is a hadith that is narrated by Imam al-Hakim. He narrates this, and some of the scholars have authenticated this hadith as well. And so after washing the dead body, this is another time to make ghusl. As some of the people said it's obligatory for someone to do it, then it's something that is good, leaving the difference of opinion. And also because that the hadith has been narrated in it, and to do it is something that without a doubt it's something that is good. And so then the next thing that he mentions here is the number 8, wal kafir idha aslama. And so he says the person who was a kafir, a disbeliever, if he becomes a Muslim, then he should make ghusl. And this is something that is from the sunnah, the ghusls that are sunnah. And this is something that is good for someone to do, and it's something that was known at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that many of the people, they knew when they come into Islam that they make the ghusl. And this is also something that is mentioned here. Some of the scholars, they said it was obligatory, and so like leaving the difference of opinion that it's something that's mustahab, this is good. And something that should be noted, and I'll mention it here because this is something that has come up sometimes. Like I've seen it with some people in their misunderstanding, is that someone will say that this person, before becoming Muslim, before they can become a Muslim, they need to go take a shower before they take the Shahada. And this is something that, like one of the explanations or commentaries on this book that we're studying here, Al-Khatib says in Iqna, which is one of the major commentaries. He says if somebody delays somebody from taking Islam, even if they, like, for a moment, like saying, no, don't take the Shahada right now, you need to go make Ghusl first, and then you can come back and take Shahada. If they do this, then they just agreed with this person staying in their state of kufr, like they agreed with this person staying in a state of disbelief, and this is also disbelief. And so this is a serious thing. So if anyone wants to become Muslim, they should never be delayed in any way, shape, or form from taking the Shahada. They should always be given the Shahada right away, even if they don't, like, say you don't know how to give the Shahada, but this person wants to become a Muslim, then they should at least say, I bear witness that there's only one God worthy of worship, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Like, this is enough for them in that state to be a Muslim, until they can say the Shahada with the Arabic. This is something that's good. But if they say something of this sense, they should never be delayed in any way, shape, or form. You shouldn't delay them until they come to a sheikh to say it. If they know they want to take the step to be a Muslim, and they should take it right away without any delay. And the person who delays someone from becoming this, they could be they're agreeing with this person staying in a state of as a disbeliever, and this is also disbelief. This is a form of disbelief. So this person should never delay any person from becoming a Muslim. This is something that is obligatory for this person right away. And of course, no one knows when they die. Maybe the person walks across the street on the way to go meet the sheikh, and then they die. So it's like, it would be best for someone to, like, someone needs to have taken the Shahada. As soon as they know that they're ready to come into Islam, they take the Shahada right away. And they should never be delayed. And I've seen this before. Someone said, you need to take a shower first, and then we'll do your Shahada. And it's like, this is actually incorrect. The person should take the Shahada right away, never be delayed, and then they can take the shower afterwards from that. And also, the shower, it requires intention, and then intention can't come about unless this person is a Muslim. Like, the proper intention needs to be from a Muslim itself. So after someone becomes Muslim, then they would take a shower. And also, as another thing that is connected to this, if someone, before they were a Muslim, say this person is a grown man and he's already had wet dreams and he's already come into a state of janaba, that state of janaba doesn't leave him. When he becomes a Muslim, he's still in a state of janaba. So he would need to take a shower to raise the state of janaba from him, and that's obligatory. So, like, say someone's a grown man and they've already, they've either been married or anything of this sort, and they're in a state of janaba. They need to take a shower, they need to take the ghusl, and this is obligatory to raise that state of janaba from them. This major impurity, and this is separate from this thing. But also, for the person who does become a Muslim, they should take the shower because of this reason as well. And this is something that's obligatory. And of course, if they're a kid, or they're like 15 years old and they've never had a wet dream or anything of this sort, then in this case, it would be sunnah for them and it wouldn't be obligatory. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. The next thing here that he mentions of the places it's preferred to do, that it's sunnah, is, he says here, وَالْمَجْنُونُ إِذَا وَالْمُغْمَى عَلَيْهِ إِذَا أَفَاقَ. And so he says, for the insane and the fainted person after regaining consciousness. So the person who's insane, or the person who fainted and he went out, he went unconscious. When he comes back to consciousness, then it's good for him to take the ghusl. And the evidence for this is the Prophet ﷺ, on his deathbed, before he passed away, he woke up from, he would fall into unconsciousness, and when he woke up, he asked if the people were praying, and so, or if they had prayed yet, and the Sahaba that were there, and then Aisha, she told him that they were waiting for him to lead him in prayer. And this is something that was known, that the Prophet ﷺ would lead the Sahaba in their prayers, and if he was around, then there would be no one else that led them for them. And so then he asked them to make him a bath, to pour him into a small bath, and so that he could make ghusl beforehand. and then when the Prophet ﷺ, he made ghusl, and then he fainted again after he made a ghusl and before praying. Then he came back to consciousness and asked if they pray. And then he repeated this again. So he made ghusl again after he came back to consciousness. And of course, this was very close to the time the Prophet ﷺ, he passed away. And of course, he had very much pain at this time. Very very severe headaches in this time, and he would pass out from this. But when he did this, he would make not just wudu to go pray, but rather he would make the full ghusl afterwards. And this is something that is recommended to do, because this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he did. So following in his footsteps is something that is good. And also, this is another example of qiyas, that the insane person is also like the fainted person, in that his consciousness has left him and he doesn't know what happened during that time. So since his consciousness left him, maybe he became junub in this time, maybe he didn't, and he doesn't know, then he should take ghusl to be on the safe side. And this is also like the person who fainted. Maybe the person that fainted, they had a wet dream and they didn't know, and they came back. Then this is also another reason that the scholars look at, that that's a good reason for them to make a ghusl if they came into that state of unconscious. And the same thing when someone is in a coma or anything of this state where they lost consciousness for a period of time and came back, then they should make ghusl. And this is something that's sunnah. It's not obligatory, but it's something that is good to do, unless they know that they became junub in that time. Then in that case, it's obligatory. The next thing that he mentions here is for the 10th one, وَالْغُسْلُ عِنْدَ الْإِحْرَامِ. And so the person, when they make ihram, this is coming into the state of being for someone to make umrah or hajj. They come into a state of being where they wear certain clothes. Like for the men, he doesn't wear any like fitted clothes, any like seamed clothes. That he doesn't wear this in this state, like a shirt or anything. Rather, he wears the ihram. And we'll talk about this inshallah when we get into the book of Hajj. But here, when the person, before they come into ihram, to make a shower beforehand, to make sure that they smell good before coming into this in this time, this is something that is good for them to do. And this is also narrated that Ibn Umar, which is one of the Sahabis that was the most keen to follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ, that he used to make ghusl for ihram before he would make the ihram. Like before he'd do this, he'd make ghusl beforehand, and so this is something. And also he would do the same thing for like standing on Arafah as well. And so this is something that a lot of times the scholars, they'll look at his actions, and because he was so keen to mimic everything that the Prophet ﷺ used to do, sometimes they'll take the ruling that this is something that is preferred for someone to do, and they would understand that the Prophet ﷺ used to do this, and this is the reason he does it. Because of his holding to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And sometimes he would go in a way that some would say it's overboard. Like he would go to the exact same spot he prayed, and he would pray in that same spot, and he would try to walk in the same footsteps that he knew he had walked in. And some of the scholars, they say this is going a little bit overboard, but it's from his love for the Prophet ﷺ. And so this is something that is, like, of course, the love of the Prophet ﷺ is something that is very good. But going overboard and like wearing the exact same things or all of these things, if it's something the Prophet ﷺ he did from a normal action that other people did, then this is something that it doesn't take the ruling of mustahab by itself. It needs to have some evidence that he did this out of an act of worship for us to follow it, to be for it to be mustahab or something that is preferred. And so the next thing that he says here is for entering Mecca. And then he says here, لِدُخُولِ مَكَّةِ وَالْوُقُوفِ بِعَرَفَةِ. And so this is something also Ibn Umar, he would do this before entering Mecca and also before standing on Arafah, as I mentioned before. And also the next one that he mentions here is also the 14th one is for spending the night in Muzdalifah. And so وَلِلْ مَبِيتْ بِالْمُزْدَلِفَةِ. And this is something that is mentioned here, and the author he mentions here, but sometimes there's differences of opinion within the madhab Shafi'i itself, and this is something that there's no clear evidence for this. So this is something that gets separated from the other things that are mentioned here. And so this one, a lot of the scholars of the Shafi'i madhab, they say this has no clear evidence for it to be mustahab. So it's not something that is necessarily mustahab in this case, because there's no evidence for it that's clear. And making the qiyas, likening one thing to another, here there's a lot of differences between it, so it doesn't necessarily take the same rulings as people coming together, or like standing on Arafah. Like this is where people are coming together in that one place. And so this is a little different. Spending the night in Muzdalifah doesn't have that same meaning there. And also stoning the 3 jimar, also لِرَمْيِ الْجِمَارِ الثَّلَاث. This is also some of the things that someone does in Hajj. These 3 things, like standing on Arafah and spending the night in Muzdalifah, and stoning the 3 jimar. Like this is something that's done in Hajj. And these last 2 are something that's also mentioned. There's no clear evidence for it to be mustahab. So this is something that's not mustahab, according to what many of the Shafi'i scholars have said. And then also the next one that is mentioned here is walid tawaf. And so like also for tawaf, he mentions this. And this is the same thing. There's no clear evidence for this one. But also taking into consideration that these days people would be making tawaf and they're all next to each other. Having a good smell about you is something that's good to have from that general thing. So maybe that would be a good thing from that point of view. But also the scholars said there's no clear evidence for this, so they haven't. Many of the scholars say it's not mustahab. And then also the sa'i, and this is like going between. This is one of the things that you would do in like Umrah and Hajj, is making the sa'i, going between Safa and Marwa, going back and forth 7 times. And we'll talk about that inshallah in the book when it comes up in Hajj. But this is also something he mentions here for it. And also for entering Medina, he says here, وَلِدُخُولِ مَدِينَةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And also for going into the city of Medina is also something, since it's also one of the 2 haramain. And so since it's one of these 2 special cities, then if Ibn Umar, he did it for Mecca, then making like saying that it's like it is also Medina. And so this is something some of the scholars said, no, it's not the same. It's not the same as Mecca. There's a difference between this, so it's not obligatory. And these are some examples of where qiyas, there's differences of opinion when it comes to how people make the qiyas. Like there's big differences between the thing that is which is like they would say like the asl, which is like the foundation, or like what are you making qiyas. So if I were to have like wine, for example, this would be like the asl. And I have something such as like marijuana. This is something that intoxicates. And I have the intoxication, which brings these 2 together. So if wine is haram because it intoxicates, then their marijuana also intoxicates, so it's also haram. So it takes that same ruling that was over here and it comes over here. And here, if we were to say like that going into Mecca, and we were to say like going into Mecca is something that is that making ghusl for going into Mecca, because what's the reason here that brings this together? And you would say because it's one of the haram, or it's like a place that is revered and respected. It's one of these cities. And then you would look at that and you would say, okay, then this is something that is revered and respected. Does it go also for Medina? But we also have evidence that the Prophet, we don't have evidence that the Prophet ﷺ would specify Medina when he would return to it, that he would make ghusl before coming into it. And there's lots of times that the Prophet ﷺ would enter it, and there's no record of this. So this is something that points that this is not a good qiyas. Like there's something in it that there's a problem with. And Allah knows best. So inshallah we'll stop here, and I hope that this class was also kind of a brief introduction to usul fiqh. And this is something that usually people will study usul fiqh by itself. And of course usul fiqh is another subject which goes into like where do the evidences come from, and how do the rulings that we're studying, how does this come together? And this is something sometimes will be studied individually, and maybe in the future I'll do a class studying usul fiqh by itself. But the best place for someone to understand this is inside of like the different things that we study in fiqh, to also understand where is this coming from. So I'll try to put these together, as a lot of times at the beginning it can be if someone's just learning this is obligatory and this is not obligatory and this is wajib, or like this is haram and this is makruh, like just learning the one this ruling for this thing. sometimes it becomes something that we don't understand the why. And having the why also helps someone understand the beauty of the Sharia and understand the wisdom behind the Sharia and why it comes in the way that it comes. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.